You're tuned in to Porch Talk with Rev Pat, where raw, real talk rules. So sit back and relax with that delicious cup of coffee or tea or your favorite glass of wine as Rev Pat delivers real, transparent, and raw conversations about all things life. Let's get started.
Welcome, and thank you for joining me on the porch again this Friday. This episode I know is going to be one episode that will bring a lot of healing to a lot of people. I am blessed to be with the beautiful Valerie Walsh. And let me tell you, she's first of all, health and fitness guru. That's what this is. I need her in my life because I just started, I just started exercising and stopping. I'm trying to get started again. So God knows who I need, folks that are into health and fitness, but that is not why she is here. Valerie has a memoir, Shattered to the Core, that is gaining a lot of momentum. And it is about mental health, mental illness, and she wants to talk. She's going to share her story regarding suicide and mental health issues with us today. So get your coffee, get your tea, grab your glass of wine, and let's get talking. Hello, beautiful. Hello. We both are suffering from sinuses, y'all. So if we both sound
so I will say, because is this going to be a recording too? So they'll be able to see?
They're going to see you. They're going to see you too, but that's okay.
So I just want to say, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me on your porch, Pat. Beautiful Pat. I got my good vibes tea with me.
Right here. She's got her tea and I've got my coffee, y'all. So you know I'm not talking with y'all.
I also have my handkerchief because yes, I'm recouping from a sinus infection. But so if you guys see me blow my nose, I'm just going to get that out of the way right now. I might blow my nose. It's all good. But I was really looking forward to this, so I didn't want to postpone.
I'm not postponing. Look, the yellow outside on our car is about the color of my shirt. So enough said about the pollen. That's about the way it's going right around here. So how have things been going before we get any further besides the sinus infection?
You know what? Great, because I have to say that since the launch of my book in January, people ask me that question, like, how's it going? You're a newly published author. This is one of my favorite, it is actually my favorite thing to do, is just to have conversations. Mm-hmm. And, about the book, yes, but more importantly, just have conversations with people, learn new things, meet new people. And, we tend to talk about the subjects that I have built my platform on, but, this is a subject that's not, that is important for everybody, people's mental health, their spiritual fitness, as I call it. I call it my spiritual fitness because I had such a hold on my physical health as a trainer for, over 20 years. I really didn't address, I thought I was spiritually connected, and I really learned I wasn't. I was suffering for many, many years.
But isn't that something? Here you are, you're all about fitness, and that's the body. And you write a book about the mind, and the two weren't in sync with one another. And God in his goodness said, okay, I need you whole. I want all of it. I'm going to get all of it in shape. So tell them, I want them, your story is so powerful. And I know we're going to end up doing a part 2, I know. And I'm going to tell you right now, in order to get part 2 of this, you're going to have to subscribe on Zippy Stream because you won't get it anywhere else. But start with at whatever point you want to, because your story is so beautiful. Wherever you start, they're gonna.
I'm gonna start with one of my favorite quotes. I'm probably gonna missay it, but you will all get the gist of it. And it's not from me; it's from another author. And it's to know the more a daughter knows about her mother, the stronger the daughter. So my story really begins. Right? The more a daughter knows about her mother, the stronger the daughter. Wow. And we've talked about this before. Like, we're all brothers and sisters, mothers and daughters. Like, you're my sister in Christ to me. Like, that's how I know we both see each other. And, I always saw my mom as my mom. And it wasn't until I lost her, for those who don't know, my mother died by suicide in 2013. So when I was piecing together my memoir, that section of my life where I was really suffering and really struggling for numerous reasons, which we'll get into, I had to go back one of my editors had asked me, she said, you got a great story. This is great, but I need to know more about your mom. And I'm like, like, we don't talk about that. Like in my family, like we just shove that under the rug. Like we're not going to talk about like the tough stuff. Right. So I asked my aunt Donna, my mother's sister, I called her up. I said, hey, can I come over and can we talk about mom a little bit? Because I have this project I'm working on. Nobody knew I was writing a book. Nobody knew. And frankly, I didn't even know if it was going to get to a book. It was just very healing to do the process of writing.
Right.
So I sit down with my aunt and I press record on my phone. And like 3 hours later, I walked out knowing so much about my mom as not only a mother, but as a woman, as a young mother, as a friend, like, all of the pieces started to link together. And I drove home and I wasn't sad. Like I never cried after having that conversation. I felt euphoric. Like I felt like peaceful. Like, and I had that adrenaline, all those good feelings inside because I was like, oh my gosh, this is who you were. Like, honestly, Pat, I'm surprised she survived as long as she did, because that's what my mother did. I found her to be a woman that survived. Unfortunately, she never found the peace within her soul to really thrive.
Mm-hmm. Wow. She survived, but didn't learn how to thrive.
Right.
Wow.
Because I think that we can all relate to that, right? When something happens, when we're stressed out in life, we go into survival mode, right? And that's good. We should do that. That works, but only for a certain amount of time, because that's exhausting. That's an exhausting state of existence.
Most definitely. I'm thinking about your comment that you went to your aunt to talk about your mom. And we talked before, and I don't have my mom here. Last week was a really tough week for me. I was in a real emotional state. Something triggered a memory of her. And then the following day, I had a conversation with someone trying to schedule some things for Mother's Day. And it was just a huge trigger. And I get those. Sometimes they're just small triggers, and sometimes they're just, whoa, like all week long.
Yeah.
And when you said you went and sat with your aunt to talk about your mom, I no longer have aunts to go to talk about her. I have my memories, and my mom was just a beautiful woman, period. But I would love to have had some conversations about the woman that she was before she, because our kids, our daughters are only going to see us as mom. They're never going to see us as the Valerie that dated, or the Valerie that went to high school, Valerie that went to middle school. We're just going to be mom, unless
I'm glad for that. I'm going to say that right now.
we know some things that
you
don't need to know. So I can imagine that was a very, very, very a peace probably came over you.
Yeah, I think that was, like that moment that was, you have some of those moments in life, and hopefully you can recognize them, where it's like that, God-like moment, that powerful moment. That was the day that my true healing began. There are certain days when it really okay, one was the day when I decided to become sober and turn my will over to God. And that's what I do every single day. I wake up and I make the conscious choice to do that. And that's another whole piece that we can talk about in a bit, is my recovery, my sobriety. But that part of knowing who my mother was and learning the circumstances that got her to that place, the final, and I do want to start by saying this is, when you have brought up triggering, I think it's important to mention that we will be talking about suicide and mental health. So if that's too tough for people to hear right now, I understand that. And this is kind of your warning that that's going to be a subject we're going to tackle today. Because I have had dear friends that have told me that they can't read my memoir right now. And I completely understand that, because they have some stuff going on as well. So when my mother passed away in 2013, she passed away from the final symptom of her depression. I'm not a doctor. I can only share my story. I am in full understanding that, mental illness and depression is a complex issue, and there's many different forms of depression. So all I'm going to share about is how my depression felt for me, how my anxiety felt for me, why I like to say that I might have periods of acute depression and I might have feelings of anxiety, but it's not who I am. It's absolutely not who I am. It might just, it might just be how I'm feeling one day. And I do think there's preventative things we can do every day to keep from falling down that rabbit hole. So when I learned the circumstances of my mother's life and the choices that she made, because she was so lost, and she also grew up in a time where these things weren't addressed. Luckily, they're being addressed now. Yep. When I got that map, shame on me if I don't look at that map. I better look at that map and choose a different road to go down, right?
When you know better, do better.
When you know better, do better. And now I know better. And I can't be, like fall into victim mode and be like, oh, I'm this way because I grew up like this. No, ma'am. I know how I grew up, and I grew up in a very loving home. My mother is a very loving, sweetest woman. But she had hard circumstances. She started off, she found out she was pregnant with my sister when she was 18, got married to my birth father, whom I never really had in my life, and because he just wasn't ready at the time to be a father. And then a couple of months later, she found out she was pregnant with me. So by the time she was 19 years old, she had 2 girls, and, was married to a man who wasn't ready to become a father. So they divorced. And, she struggled. I won't go into all the detail, but she struggled. And one of her coping mechanisms, unfortunately, were pills and alcohol. She was a functioning alcoholic. And again, without the help that we have today, like if hopefully nowadays we feel that way, although we have a long way to go. We go to therapy, we might go to a recovery program, there's all these tools, but it's much more talked about than when my mother was trying to reach out for help. She was handed Valium with no follow-up, let's mask those feelings, right?
Yeah. Well, really, we say, and I'm going to make this statement because I really do believe this statement. Yes, we've come a long way, but we have not come far enough.
Absolutely.
But still, even in my culture, it's difficult for people to talk about mental health. It was difficult for me to face my own diagnosis of anxiety and the need to take medication to control it. I didn't want, my first mind was, I don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. I don't want to do that. And then the second thing was when it hit me, if I say this, really, this is how I felt. I didn't tell my husband, I didn't tell my daughters. If I say this, what will people think about me? Because I'm a minister, I'm a biblical teacher. Will people just say, well, and what is she not doing? Is she not praying enough? Is she not praising? That whole ball of wax. So we've come further than when I was a kid, because you just didn't talk about it, period. Right. You didn't. Mm-hmm. To where we at least can talk about it if we choose. Now, do you think, let me ask you this. I do think that it takes a lot of courage to talk about those things. And I feel really bad for those that don't have that type of courage as of yet to really talk about, I'm not okay. Mm-hmm. I know I look at, and you said something, you said she was a functioning alcoholic, which means she got up, she went to work, or she did whatever she needed to do throughout the day. Mm-hmm. She was still an alcoholic. So yeah. Here's a learning moment for me, because when I think functioning alcoholic, and I don't want to put her in a box, I think this is someone who manages to get through the day and do what she has to do, and then at night she makes up for that 8 hours away from home. Or do I have it totally opposite? Is it a lot deeper than that?
Well, for everybody, it's different. For my mother, and again, I don't want to talk so much about exactly, the minutia of her life, because that's her story. So mm-hmm. I don't want to speak for her. I just want to,
I really respect that.
Yeah, and I just, but what I observed.
What you observed.
Yeah, from what I observed, she was a great mom. Like, there was never a question whether my sister and I were loved. We always knew we were wanted and loved, and she always put us first. Now people will argue, but she picked up the drink first. Okay, you know what? Her intentions were to always put us first. So I love when intent is brought in. So for her, what I observed was she would go to work, so she was married for a short time to my birth father, and then she was single, and then she had gotten remarried to my stepfather, who was a terrible, terrible man. And my mom had to work very hard, and she thankfully divorced from him when I was in 8th grade. So about 10 years of that marriage. So 8th grade through, when I left for college, I just saw my mom go back to being a single mom again. And now trying to think of how am I going to send my girls to college? Because she wanted us to go to school. She wanted us, every mother wants their kids to do better than them. And so that's what I observed. I observed her going to work. She worked hard, 1, 2 jobs, whatever she could do. And then the drinking did progress where it got worse, where she was drinking more at night, every night. It used to be like just weekends or when we weren't home. So it was progressive. It wasn't like I came home during the day and saw my mother pass out on the couch. It wasn't like that.
Which is what people picture in their heads. And it's like,
right. And it's almost in some ways more dangerous because it's that secretive disease where it's like, when finally people realize something was going on, you're like, I had no idea, because she was always able to show up. Right. And so, but we knew, and it was no secret. We watched my mom struggle her whole life. And, when I tell people, when I talk about what does the face of depression looks like, me, it looks like my mom. It looks like, it looks like so many people that we know, and we're doing the work right now. When you say there's so much work to be done, there is, but these conversations are where it starts, because hopefully I like to kind of oversimplify a very complex subject. Right. Hopefully we're going to be at a dinner party sometime and you'll be able to talk about the fact that you might be feeling some acute depression as comfortably as you would like to say, like, I have a sinus infection. Like, mental illness is an illness, you know what I mean?
Sinus infection. And I'm acute.
I have a sinus infection and I'm going through a depressive episode at the moment. Like, we should,
And watch people pass out and drop their forks and go, wait a minute,
what just happened there?
Like
we have a very self-deprecating sense of humor in my family, and that's a good thing. That's another tool we pick up. But honest to God, sometimes I'll just say that to people so matter of fact, and be like, yeah, I'm going through a depressive episode at the moment. And I'm like, what? I'm like, no, I really am, but I'm working every day to get out of it. Because that's, not to make light of it, but that's how comfortable I want people to get with talking about mental illness, because it is an illness. And that's why we no longer say somebody committed suicide. They died by the final symptom of their depression. And for everybody, it looks different. For some people see the writing on the wall. Some people, it's a shocker. That's why it's so difficult to say, how could I have helped? Take that right off of your plate right now. That's one thing I will say, Pat, I was blessed with, is never questioning, I should have, could have, would have. I had angst over knowing she was at peace. That I put that pressure on myself. I was looking for signs. I put that pressure on myself, but I never put the pressure of myself of, what could I have done? Because I just, unfortunately, I knew, like, she was going down that rabbit hole for a number of years. And so I now, for me and for my family, I just try every day to do small, little, next right things to prevent myself from going down a rabbit hole that anybody in my family could easily go down, because our brains are wired a certain way.
But look,
it's environmental.
You might repeat that piece just a little bit louder.
Which one?
Yes.
Small
things.
Yeah, I literally do small, next right things, because if I think of big picture, I get overwhelmed. So like today I had, for example, I'll just use today. Today I had all these lists help me from getting overwhelmed, when I get overwhelmed, it triggers my anxiety. So I'm a big list maker, and that list has to be right on my kitchen counter, and it has to be fluid. I'm not a device person. It doesn't work for me for that. I don't I can't.
Fluid.
I have to have it in writing. I still have, a at a glance calendar that I use, but I'm real old school that way, but it works for me. So I keep a very fluid list on my kitchen counter, and it's my to-do list. And I had all these tasks that I had to do, and one of them was an expense report. Okay. I loathe expense reports. So I knew the next right thing for me to do today was to do that first. Like, get it out of the way. Get it out of the way. Usually a non-negotiable for me is to get up and exercise first, but I'm feeling under the weather. So for me, recoveries for my body, I needed that. So exercise is not going to happen, but a walk later might. But I had to get that expense report out of the way so then I could check off the other tasks. So, that's what works for me, like little things like that, just doing the next right thing. I'm part of a recovery program, and I don't like to name it, but I like to give people hints because if they know the language I'm speaking, they'll know what recovery program I'm talking about. And one of the steps, is to, keep your character defects in check.
Wow.
I refer to the Beastie Boys. You better check yourself before you wreck yourself when I think of that. So
wait a minute. Keep your character defects.
Keep your character defects in check. We make mistakes every day. Every day. I might make a mistake every day. And sometimes they might just be a mistake about a thing. Or sometimes I might hurt somebody's feelings. Like, I'm a mom and I make mistakes. And I had a conversation with my daughter not too long ago, and I wasn't very patient with her on the phone. So now I know better, so I do better. So what did I do? I called her up and I apologized.
Right.
I apologized. Because if I don't do that, that will eat at me. You know what I mean? Like, it's little things like that, little things like that I've learned that, when I finally decided to get into recovery. I know I totally skipped ahead, but it wasn't until I got sober, Pat, that I found that spiritual connection. Like, that was the only thing that was standing in my way between me and my higher power, me and my God, as I know him, was my false truths. And my false truth was my addiction to alcohol.
Wow. When you say my false truth, did the alcohol make you believe one thing that really wasn't happening, or was it just a way to fill a void, or to give you a truth that you didn't have when you say my false? Because that's, listen at that statement. My false truth, which means what I thought to be true wasn't.
Right. So
wow.
There's it was shared in my recovery program one time, and I wrote it down because it was so powerful. You ever wonder why alcohol is called spirits? Now, everybody responds to alcohol differently. And at first, when I started drinking, it was fun. It lifted my spirits. It was casual. It was fun. It was what it was. But very quickly, it turned to be not that way, because I do believe that my brain is wired a certain way. I believe some people can drink safely and others cannot. I cannot. And I think progressively it got worse over time. For me, at a very young age, and then it just became, more so later on. I never reached for alcohol to avoid or to escape. I actually wouldn't drink during really hard times because I just wouldn't. But I always reached for alcohol to lift my spirits, to feel more sociable, more likable, more pretty, more comfortable in my own skin.
More pretty than gorgeous.
But you know what? When you struggle with low self-esteem, you know what I mean? Like, people could tell you that all they want to, but when you're really not tapped into your own beauty, and you really don't feel, it's not even about the outer, it's about more being comfortable in your own skin, that social anxiety. Like, I I reached for alcohol to socially fit in. I never drank alone. It wasn't that kind of thing, but I would use alcohol to lift my spirits. Now I know in sobriety, my spirits have never been so lifted. And the only thing I changed was I got rid of that false truth and I started living my purpose, my passion. That's where I find.
So
And
would you say that you convinced yourself that you were in a better mood because you were drinking?
Well, I mean, physiologically, when you get buzzed, you feel happier until you go over to that tipping point. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, you know.
Like if I went to dinner, say,
you don't have to use you. I can use me. Yes, you're telling the truth. Never thought
Right.
about it that way.
Yeah, until you go over that tipping point. But I mean, it wasn't like nobody had convinced me. I mean, like I knew after, it's not the first drink that gets me drunk. I never stopped at one. So I didn't have that self-control over alcohol. I just didn't. I wanted another. I wanted to feel buzzed. I wanted to feel euphoric. I wanted to feel all those things that people sometimes around me seem like they naturally felt. And I'm like, why can't I feel that? You know, why can't I feel that? And
Really?
anyway, yeah. And that's not, I mean, that's a pretty.
No. I'm saying because I love that. I'm like you. I love talking to people and learning different things because in my mind, I don't. It just makes you wonder, or why wasn't I? Because I've never felt that way around other people. I've never felt like, I wonder why they feel good and I don't. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, I'm not saying,
like you said, like they're more up. I would say it like that. They're more up than I am.
well, it's not even, how do I put it? It's not even in every situation. There were certain situations that I would say it was more, like I would drink at parties because I always felt awkward at parties, but you get me in an exercise scene and I was comfortable there. So it was certain situations that made me feel uncomfortable that I felt like I had to have like a little
exercising around people than you were in a room with people.
Because that was my gig. Like I was a fitness instructor. That's what I did, right?
We're opposite. Because you're not getting in a room full of people with leggings and a t-shirt on. It's not gonna happen. I'm telling you. It just now see how different people are? Because in a room full of people, I can engage with anyone. If God opens that door, hey, I probably leave the place. If it's 20 people in there, I can guarantee you at least 15 of them I will leave and make a connection with.
And
put me in a room with some people exercising, I would probably.
No, not in my group, not with my peeps. We would all lift you up and you would come back the next week and you would love that class because that's what we do. But I will say it's getting better. Like it's definitely getting better. Like now I go out and I love making connections and I always have. But I want to drive the point home that I was probably always wired to be an alcoholic is what I'm saying. It wasn't like it gradually happened for me. And everybody's alcoholism is different. I just know for me, my brain is wired that when I picked up that first drink, and this is how I know that, Pat, when I picked up my first drink, I remember it. I was 15 years old and I opened up the refrigerator in my parents' garage and I took a beer out and I chugged it. And then I called up my good friends, my buddies. I lived across the street from these two boys who are still like two of my closest friends to this day. One of them is my son's godfather. And I said, guys, I just chugged a beer. I'm like, and I felt like ready to go. Like I was all amped up. I hit the ground running after that. Like I didn't drink often, but when I did, I partied. Like my brain was already wired that way. And people around me weren't. Like some people would drink but I was that girl in high school where, I'd party and I'd be the one you'd be walking home. Like I was fun till I wasn't, till you were walking me home and holding my hair up, like it just, and not everybody got that way. And I thought they did, but it wasn't until in my sobriety now that I've, made amends with some people that I went to school with. And they're just like, they weren't shocked when I told them I was sober. Like I'm going to my 30th high school reunion coming up this summer. And they all know I'm sober because I've been very public about it. It's just what I've chosen to do. Because for me, my mental health and my sobriety go hand in hand. And there are people in my high school that are so not surprised. They're like, I'm so happy for you, because they kind of saw that. They're like, why does she drink to that point? We can all stop, but why does she keep drinking to that point? So I couldn't drink safely. That's it.
Wow.
And you know,
First day, from 15 years old.
From the very first day. And I think sometimes it's good to simplify it like that. You know, like I don't have to overthink it. I just know that for this alcoholic, that first drink gets me drunk. I cannot safely drink alcohol. And thank God that I finally had that spiritual awakening in 2017, because without my sobriety, I would have never found my peace. I've never known peace until I found my sobriety.
Well, I think you're breaking it down that way. No, I don't think. I know you're breaking it down that way. Even, and I'm not saying this from the standpoint of a person who has never had the issue. I'm saying the simplicity, the way you're breaking it down so that it is in easy language. You're helping someone who probably just could not put words to what it was like for them. And maybe this is an open door. No, stop making me say maybe. I know that this is an open door for them to probably go and sit down and have a conversation with a family member like me, who could never understand how you can't have hey, don't you know you've had too much? And maybe explain it. Hey, look, I need you to listen to this podcast and listen to this woman describe it. And she's talking about me. All of these years that I couldn't say it to you, I hear it now.
Yeah.
So that, man, I'll tell you off camera one day why that's a light bulb moment for me.
Yeah. So when I say, you know, like when I talk about my story, it is one of hope, because we have answers out there. There is help out there. And for everybody, those tools are going to be different. You know, I just always knew, like when I lost my mom in 2013, you know, everyone goes through stuff, and I don't have to go through it all, but my stuff happened all at once. Like it was like that period of like, you know, a few years where it was just like one blow after another, which we're all going to have hard times. But when my spirit was so broken, and I wasn't doing anything to help heal it, and really, you know, being a functioning alcoholic and not getting sober was not serving me well. You know, now I know that life's going to happen, right? But I'm better equipped to handle life on life's terms. Like, you know, we're all going to go through hard times. I don't think just because I'm sober that I'm going to live like rainbows and unicorns are not going to be.
No, that's not, you know, that's not happening.
But you know what? I've got a family in sobriety now. I've got my family at the gym. I've got a better spiritual connection to my higher power. Like I'm better equipped to handle life on life's terms. Like, you know, we've talked, you and I. You shared something very powerful, and I've been doing it every day. It was a life changer for me, which was praying specifically for what you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was, because I always had that Catholic guilt of, oh, you don't want to pray for what you want. Like, just thank God all the time. That's what was wired in my brain.
Okay. I'm glad we unwired that, because that's not.
We unwired that.
That's not.
Right.
No. That's
and I don't want any of my CCD teachers to think, why I didn't teach you that, Valerie. I'm not saying you did. I might have just taken it that way.
Thank you. She's not saying, she's not throwing no shade.
No, I'm not throwing no shade.
We hear what we need to hear.
That's right.
We hear what we need to hear when we need to hear it. Let me put that out there. We hear what we need to hear when we need to hear it. So how hard was it to get to this place where you are now?
A lot easier than staying in the place I was. And like, yeah.
Good answer, girl.
Really, honestly, like, because I was just so, the only way I could describe the way I was feeling, and I always do this, like I point to that right in the cavity of my chest. And anybody who's gone through that knows exactly that feeling of angst, like unsettled angst. I was feeling all the time. Like I needed to get rid of that. So, as soon as I was able to get rid of that, and, the first step I took was walking into my recovery program and then learning what it took in that recovery program to stay sober every day. It's a hard program. It's an easy program to learn. It's just hard to do those little steps every day, So anyhow,
even those of us, let's be honest, this is helpful for even, because what you're talking about is not just for those who are recovering.
Right.
This is really life.
100%.
It takes a lot of little things to get through the day. It really does.
So when you say that, a lot of times I'll be in a meeting and be like, gosh, I think I wish that I could bring so-and-so to a meeting, even though they're not an alcoholic.
I mean, look, this keep your character defects in check. That was for me. Because I know my limitations. I'm very aware of my limitations, and I'm very aware of those things character-wise. And she's not talking about being some thrown off person, crazy, whatever. She's just talking about, when I hear character defects, I know my flaws.
Yeah.
I know my flaws. I know when I want to have a fast and loose lips like crazy. When I'm in that mode, if this thing here can cut you more than any knife ever, when I'm in that mode.
Oh yeah.
So when I hear you say keep your character defects in check, that means rather than just saying that's just me, like we like to do, that's just who I am, which is just an excuse to do the fool. Now I have this thing that I just wrote down, and I'm going to put it on a sticky. Keep your character defects in check. So when
in my sticky note, I said the Beastie Boys. Ode to the Beastie Boys. You better check yourself before you wreck yourself. So I wanted to just note one more thing, Pat, when you said about the alcoholism. Thankfully, and it's a miracle that I'm losing the word here, but I don't have any urges to drink. Like that left me. My obsession to drink, that actually left me. I never crave. That's what I'm looking for. I never crave a drink. Really don't.
Really?
But because it can leave people, and my craving has left me. But I fear alcohol enough. I have a very respectable fear. I never want to lose that fear of alcohol because if I'm thinking like, oh, I'm doing good in my recovery and I let, this time go, I think I can drink. I think I can have one drink. That's not going to happen. So there's a saying, and people will now know what program I'm talking about when they hear this. I came in for my drinking. I stayed for my thinking. So when you talked about how this is really for life, I've learned more about how to handle life and how to work through things and cope with things and think about things differently from this recovery program. Thankfully, it doesn't have to work for me every day to stop any cravings, but it has taught me how to handle life in a very productive and a very peaceful way.
And you said, and I'm still going to give you all the kudos because it may very well be the best program ever on earth. But I think anything that has to do with our changing comes from is stirred up and founded in a place within us that says, for whatever reason, for whatever propelled us to that moment, I don't want to be like this anymore. And because Valerie doesn't want to be like this anymore, Valerie is willing to put in the work not to be this anymore. That's across the board.
Right.
So I want to give you kudos for that because you are an inspiration to other people and you will be an inspiration to other people because a lot of people would have said, I came in for my drinking and I'm leaving out with my drinking. A lot of people would have said, this is maybe just a bit too hard for me because I still have the taste. She said she doesn't have the desire anymore. I still have the need. I still crave it. So
Right.
I'll give into that craving. I think it takes, you know,
Practice. You have a spiritual practice every single day.
of course, but I think it's more than it. And I want to say this to you because I want to honor those like you who can sit and share their testimony and be secure in knowing, like you said, I may not crave it, but I fear it because I know that that's something that I don't need to do. That's going to take me in a direction I don't want to go. But I want to honor not only you, but those that have that had the courage to say, for whatever reason, this is not going to be a part of my life. And why that's important is because we don't get there on our own. Do you know what I'm saying? We don't reach these places on our own.
100%.
I can say you were courageous, but I can also say you had the courage to step into what already was your destiny.
I knew
this book, this memoir was your destiny. When God begins to propel us to another level where we may have known him, but we didn't know him, he does it in big ways, and he does it in a way so that when you step out of that thing, it's just like with Peter, when he says, the enemy has come to sift you as wheat, Peter, and I gave him permission, but I prayed for you. And when you come back, strengthen your brothers. And Peter said, no, never me. I'll never do that thing. But he did do that thing. And he did come back. It's the same with us. We can be doing the same thing that we've been doing day after day, year after year, month after month, whether it's good for us or bad for us. But for those of us that have already been chosen, there will come a moment and a time when he will propel you into your destiny. And it's your choice, because he's never going to force us. It's our choice to say, I choose better than this. And that's how we get through it. So I know that I don't want to discount the program. I just want to say for those that are like you, that made the decision that I don't want this anymore in my life. It's the program plus your courage.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Yes.
what they say, faith is an action word, right?
Yes.
Faith
Yes.
is an action word. You know, I knew that when, you know, everything I've ever done, and I'm not trying to downplay, like, I appreciate that. Thank you for saying that, Pat. I don't want to downplay that. Yes, I have to do the work every day, but I do know that, like, in my life, especially being a physical trainer, and I coached people to do 5Ks and marathons and all these fun things. And even as myself, as being a coach, I would hire a trainer to train for something and be accountable to a group of people, because that's what always helped me to get from point A to point B, to get to that goal. So I always knew, like, for me, I needed accountability. And so I thought, like, why would I not find a group of people to help me with my sobriety? Like, you know,
I may as well get help. Now,
help me over here.
Were you drinking while you were training?
Oh, yeah. I think you'll find that it's very common in the field of athletes. Yeah, you should look up the statistics of the amount of athletes that have a problem with addiction.
What?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I love football, so I know some of, football players and whatever, but wait a minute. Well,
A lot of functioning alcoholics,
ask the crazy question, and don't put no comments, because I'm already telling you that it doesn't make sense. But this is how my crazy little brain works. With all of the sweating that you do working out, how could that possibly stay in your system?
Oh, it doesn't. I'm sure there
were.
Pat, I am sure there were some spinning classes I taught where people were like, whew. What were you doing the night before? But again, like, when I was in my 20s, I lied to myself. I'm like, everybody parties like this. You know what I mean? And I have a couple people.
Y'all, if y'all in that spinning class, don't be putting no notes in here. Y'all.
Yeah, right.
Just
So I do want to say, if you're watching this or listening to this, and you know somebody in your life that you might think has a problem, confront them. Even if they get mad at you, when they find sobriety, they will forgive you later and they will love you for it, because that happened to me. And I remember being in my 20s and working for this trainer. And I don't know how I do it, but except to say that I was 22 at the time, and we could do a lot at 22, 23 that we can't when you're approaching 50, right?
Right.
So I would show up to open up this gym at 5:00 in the morning. I barely got maybe 2 or 3 hours sleep, probably still buzzed from the night before, but I would get in and I would open up the gym. I would teach a class at like 6 a.m. I don't know how I pulled it off, but I was young. And this one trainer, very good looking trainer, if I do say so, but I also really respected him. I really respected him professionally. He pulled me aside, and this is over 20 years ago. And he pulled me aside and he was like, "What are you doing? Like, what are you doing to yourself?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? Like, what's the big deal? We all went out last night." He's like, "Valerie," he's like, "No," he's like, "You're better than this. You got more for your," he was basically telling me, "You got more, opportunities for you down the way. Like, get rid of this. What are you doing? What are you doing?" And I didn't think about it, and I went on. But when I got sober, I messaged him all these years later.
Oh.
And told him what an impact. I'm like, "You may not have known it at the time, but when you pulled that aside," that was one of the first things I thought of in my sobriety, were the couple people that pulled me aside and loved me enough to do that.
Wow. And I know he appreciated that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
before, because it's 1:47, I want you, just before you begin, and I've already told you before we started this that we're going to do a part 2. I want you just to, for somebody listening, because this is someone who knows personally
Mm-hmm.
the effects of alcoholism and the effects of being around someone who cannot hold their alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Just close with an encouraging word for not only the victim of this illness, the person suffering with this illness, but for the family members. And you said if you know someone who is.
Well,
just to encourage them that if they choose to get better, it will get better.
yeah, I will say I have seen miracles in my sobriety of people in my recovery program that have stories similar to mine, but some that you can't imagine, that how did they find sobriety? And, they live this life where they, let go of that guilt of things they might have done, when they were drinking. And because we are walking miracles, and we don't have to be, have a problem with alcohol and then find sobriety to say that. But I believe in hope. I believe in miracles. I am living proof of it. And, I will also encourage anybody that's living with somebody that's an alcoholic to think about going to Al-Anon. It's hugely helpful. And there are other programs out there. And to, I did say to not be afraid to say something. You could say something, but don't live that battle too long. It's not your battle. It's not your battle. So sometimes.
As you said, don't live that battle.
Yeah, don't live that battle. That's their battle.
And that is true with life. That is just true with life, period. The things that we see people going through, sometimes we take on burdens that we're not supposed to carry.
Yep.
And when you're carrying a burden that you're not supposed to carry, then what you're doing, you're becoming God in a person's life rather than let God be God.
That's absolutely true. They have their own.
He has a plan. He already has his plan for them. So don't take her at her word. And I'm telling you, don't become the person that keeps God from doing his work in your loved one's life.
And in your beautiful words to me, Pat, I will share and pray for that person what you would want for yourself, but be willing to accept God's will.
But be willing to accept God's will.
I listened.
She listened. Be willing to accept his will. Miss Valerie, now I know we're going to commit, so I know your schedule is busy, but you have the link to my calendar, so get on it so we can do part 2.
Definitely.
And Beyond the Porch is really unscripted. You get to talk about whatever you want to.
Awesome.
You get
I
to
like
talk
that.
about whatever you want to. No script, no any of that. Much like this Porch Talk, except we go a little bit deeper. And it's exclusive. So if you want to hear part 2 of Miss Beautiful Valerie's story, or you want to just listen in on our conversation, real raw and in depth, you're going to have to be a subscriber through Zippy Stream, ZIPISTREAM. If you subscribe through Zippy Stream, you will have access to that exclusive part 2 conversation that we're going to have Beyond the Porch. That is what it's called, Beyond the Porch, and that is exclusive content. I want to thank you all for joining us on the porch today. Thank you for putting up with both of us dealing with sinus issues, but I refuse.
We did pretty well.
We did well. I refuse not to do my podcast. I refuse to let the enemy jump in and take over. I won't do that. This is real. This is raw, and it is unscripted. So if you live in Texas, you already know what I'm talking about when it comes to these allergies, because we've been dealing with this. So be blessed, my friends. Be blessed. I will see you right back here on the porch next week. Be a blessing to yourself. Be intentional about seeing the blessings that every day holds for you. I mean that with my whole heart. Every day has a blessing for you. Be intentional about seeking it, but more importantly, be intentional about being a blessing to somebody else. We'll see you next week. Wonderful.